The following stories were found on the r/LetsNotMeet subreddit. These stories are of true encounters with stalkers, and I will be leaving links to the original story down in the description below. I hope you're ready to enjoy another sleepless night. And remember, nightmares are the best kind of dreams. Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time, who lived near a nice country village. And as I was between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take coffee breaks frequently and wear basically whatever I liked as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I've ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were usually sweet old people who would visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. So you often got to know all of them, and some of them we even gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, a badass 80-year-old grandma who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive, you guessed it, a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, though, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He was in his late 40s. He wore a straw hat, had round, gold-rimmed glasses, and would wear strange graphic shirts with naked women on them, or Professional Pussy Patrol sort of slogans on the back. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something. He had this weird half smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones. Anyways, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I had gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and my red polo, and my tool belt to prune the dead head plants as I went. With the hose in my hand and sun on my face, I was busy, but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center.
Well, hello there.
Out of practically nowhere, he slipped out behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. I told him to have a nice day and to let me know if I need anything, and as I turned to continue watering, he says,
I've never seen you here before. You're a new one.
Huh? Me? Well, I've been here for 8 months now.
I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look so young.
Thanks. I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work.
Nice to meet you, Casey.
I suddenly remember my name badge and get slightly irritated that he now knew my full name. I made a beeline for the smoking area where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come into the store regularly. Usually mid-afternoon, coincidentally, or so I thought, around the same time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the most smallest, pointless things, like floristry wire or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seemed like he would purposely make a purchase with the intention of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, Statements mostly like,
"You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down. You have new glasses."
or
"That's a different lip color to yesterday."
he would always announce my name loudly and deliberately during every interaction. I felt uncomfortable, but I was 23 and just politely shrugged it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. He jumped out from behind one and made me jump, to which I was kind of pissed about him doing because I dropped a glass ornament and it had smashed. He bent down and also tried to help by grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled a leaflet out from his back pocket and told me that he was an artist and had a Christmas art show happening in the local church hall, and he wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought I would like his work, even though I had never indicated that I was interested in art to him or anyone else for that matter, so I thought it was kind of strange. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, "No, the invitation is specifically for you." He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast as he said, "You." So I'm standing there in the dark corner, obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, and just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said I was busy with my boyfriend that day, sorry, and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling strange about that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it, and they all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store, so I could maybe hang out in the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo must have missed a few of the temp Christmas staff. Because one day I get told by one that your friend is asking for you at the tills. It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by, as it was a fairly popular place for gifts and other things. So I was thinking it was maybe my ex's mom or something. I head to the till, and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringe, but he had seen me now, so I walk over and ask what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets in a sexual kind of position. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him and he kind of looked at me with this angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point, I'd had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that just happened, and all of the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV and agreed it was so strange the way he gave me this gross picture, and he told me that he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances, and said I was doing the right thing, and that he would try to see him off next time. The next day was a Sunday, and I was not due into work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from HQ stating that an anonymous caller had called to report a staff member inappropriately coming on to a customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to have sex with him, and had led him on and was obviously promiscuous, and that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had and ranted loudly about how I had been cheating on my boyfriend before hanging up. HQ luckily didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy and suggest I report it to the police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke to said that he matched the description of a man who was a local pest, somebody who often harasses young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk girls in his car and had attempted to abduct a young girl 4 years ago. The police officers assured me they would file the report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed in the garden center or anywhere near me again, and if he did, I was to call the police and he would be arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never stopped him from sending a ranting letter to my workplace, addressed to me, saying that he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and receive the gift he drew me. Fortunately, the police saw this as unsolicited contact and he was, thankfully, arrested. So, creepy artist guy, let's not meet. Ever again. This happened only a couple months ago, so I'm still quite on edge. I had a group of friends that lived about an hour and a half away from me, and I would frequently go hang out with them. The drive never really bothered me, but after this particular night, I dread it. I first noticed the car 20 minutes into my trip home. It was about 2 a.m., so not many cars were on the road. This guy was practically riding my bumper, which I thought was strange because there were no other cars out. I quickly wrote it off and turned back to my music. The time on the freeway is about 55 minutes, and he was behind me the entirety of it. When I saw he was getting off at the same exit, I got a little anxious, but I told myself that I was just being paranoid. I was heading home as I normally would until I noticed this car was making every turn right behind me. I started turning down random roads to test my theory of them following me, and just as I suspected, they were trailing behind. I stopped going towards my house and started driving randomly, trying to think of what to do. I tried whipping down roads at the last second, but that didn't work. I was driving through red lights and stop signs because I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped. I was desperate at this point, so I called the police and told them I was being followed for over an hour. I gave them the description of my car and my location. The dispatcher told me to drive to the police station and there would be officers waiting in the parking lot. As soon as I turned into the parking lot, the car sped off. One of the police cruisers immediately flipped on their lights and followed them. I stayed at the station and gave my statement, but I never got a call or anything like that. After that night, I only drive during the day. I don't want to know what would have happened if I were to go home. I ended up following up with the police station, and the officer I spoke to said that he wouldn't get into detail, but there was a lot of meth found in the man's car, along with a lot of sharp weapons. He's now in jail. I definitely needed that peace of mind. Backstory. I'm a recovering high-functioning alcoholic. 8 months sober in all, and I only fell off the wagon once, and it's been 3 months since then. I'm also a doctor. I run a business, and I have a few patients sent to me from the hospital behavioral center, the courthouse mandated cases, and the local university's counseling center. About 3 months ago, back when I fell off the wagon, I was going through a big malpractice suit from a woman who was angry that I had testified against her in family court, leading her to lose custody. She'd made up lies, we won, the suit was dropped. Easy enough, in theory. August is when the story starts. Beginning of the month, I sent my assistant and my secretary home because it was Friday and beautiful out. Patients were done for the day, so I stayed back to finish notes, and around 6 p.m. I finished up and began locking up the building. I felt something odd, like the heebie-jeebies or something, so I looked up and around, but noticed nothing. Walking around the side of my building to my car, I noticed a tall, very skinny man standing at the sidewalk just staring at me. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and had a ball cap covering his face. When I saw him staring, he turned and ran. Odd, but nothing to get my panties twisted for. I went on home and thought about nothing else. That night, the alarm went off at my building around 3 a.m. My husband was still awake, reading, so he went with me to meet the police. Usually no big deal. It can trip over several things. When I got there, the word devil was written in red paint across the side of the building. Camera showed that same tall guy doing it, but I hadn't seen his face well enough to give a description. My friend and handyman named Mike came the next day and took care of it, citing that it was probably just a prankster since my office isn't in the most amazing of neighborhoods. I mean, work where you're needed, right? Nothing happened until the following Wednesday. I was leaving late since I take uninsured patients after hours on a sliding scale this day, around 10 p.m. I came out and my tires were slashed on my car. All of them. I called service, my husband came and got me, and I was spooked, but still not shaken. The next day I get my mail out of the bin and there was a box with no return address in it for me. I open the package and it's pictures of me at the grocery store, at a barbecue on my porch at home, getting out of my car at my child's school. Worst, of me at the bar, drinking when I had fallen off the wagon the previous months before. Probably 50 pictures in total. I immediately called my husband, my lawyer, and the police. They took my statement and the box. Completely freaked out, I decided to take the rest of the week off and do my appointments from Skype at home. The next day, Friday, I was setting up my laptop in our sunroom and getting my stuff ready. I go back in to refill my teacup with water, and when I come back out, that same guy is standing outside the room, completely glass all the way around, and staring in. I dropped my cup, screamed, and ran inside. He started banging on the front door and ringing the bell over and over. I called 911, and what felt like forever, but was probably just a couple of minutes later, it just stopped. Police came, took my description now, but found nothing and no one. My husband came home early, and at this point I was terrified. All went quiet for the next week or so I returned to work with the protection from Mace and my employees, so I was never alone, and I thought everything was fine. Until Saturday came. I had a basketball game for my son, and my husband coaches. I agreed I'd bring cupcakes and pizza for the team because it was their last game. About 3/4 of the way in, I stepped out to go grab the party supplies for my car. When I opened the door, I noticed something was off. The smell, things moved around, some combination of the both. When I opened the trunk, I realized my car had been broken into. My spare keys were taken from my purse that I had stupidly locked in my trunk before the game. I panicked. I ran in, I grabbed my husband to tell him. He, of course, criticized me for leaving my purse in the trunk, and told me to call Mike ASAP since my house keys were on that set. I call Mike and he says he can be there at 6 p.m. to change the locks. Fine, right? I settle down a little and we finish with the boys. After lunch and a couple errands, we head home. Immediately upon pulling into the driveway, I hear our dogs going crazy. My husband goes inside first, and then tells me to come in. We watch the Nest camera and see that someone was trying to come into the house, but unable to get in because our Great Danes and our German Shepherd nearly bit him when he stepped in. Evidently, my husband had forgotten to set the alarm when we left that morning in a rush. At least we're equally stupid between me with the purse and him with the alarm. I called my friends, who was the chief of police in a neighboring city, and asked what could be done. They hadn't made any arrests, and I was getting more afraid by the day. He called around and got police surveillance on my office and my house. This seemed to settle things down until last Friday, I was alone in the house because my boy and husband had gone on a camping trip with some friends. My friend and my sister were supposed to come by around 8 p.m. I decided to take a nap for a bit before they got there. I guess about 40 minutes passed when I heard my dog start barking. I realize there's some commotion going on outside, police lights, and I peek out the window. Standing in my yard, I see my neighbor, another young man I've watched grow up, and several police officers taking down this tall, lanky guy on the ground and handcuffing him. I go out and my neighbor proceeds to tell me that they were driving by on watch duty and saw this man trying to get into my house. The police found tape, a knife, and several different types of drugs on his person. He confessed to being set up to scare and hurt me by the woman I had testified against. He claimed he wasn't going to kill me, but the investigation is ongoing as this just happened last week. I'm recovering. Tall, lanky guy, let's not meet again. This happened about 5 years ago. I'm a female, and at the time I was 21. I was visiting my old hometown, and me and some old school friends decided to go to a local club. For some reason I can't remember, I left earlier than the others and decided to walk home since it was only a couple of kilometers away, and taxis are expensive. It was winter and very quiet. No one to be seen anywhere. I walked very fast because it was cold and I wanted to get home quickly. That's when I saw a man walking in an opposite direction, but at first thought nothing of it and assumed he was just some person going home from a bar or party like me. He greeted me, but I didn't know him, so I just kept on walking without answering. To my horror, he turned around and started following me, and I dialed the emergency number to my phone and put it in my pocket so that I could make a secret call if he did anything sketchy. He ran up to me and started asking me questions, like why I was walking alone, what my name was, did I live here, etc., etc. I didn't really answer to anything and told him I didn't need company. He was starting to really creep me out, and then he told me he was going to walk me home so that nobody does anything to me. I wanted to scream at him that you are the only fucking person here who can do anything, so fuck off. I don't know if he actually had some superhero complex and just really wanted to save damsels in distress, but I wasn't in distress until he came along, and he was drunk, and if you don't mind me saying, he looked a little bit crazy. He then proceeded to grab my hand like we were some romantically involved couple. I didn't dare to resist, and my home was very close, so I didn't want to anger him. When I saw my house, I told him that I was fine now and that he could let me go. He asked if I was home alone, and I told him that my sister and her boyfriend were there. That seemed to put him off, and he hugged me, then told me goodbye and left. I almost ran home. I never saw him again, but later, a friend of mine who lived close to home told me of a similar experience. Maybe just a year after that, my mom told me she had been walking home late at night, and some drunk creep had followed her too, saying the exact same things about making sure nothing happens to her, just as he had said to me. So, creepy dude with the superhero complex, let's not meet. I had a stalker growing up. She lived in my neighborhood with her parents. Let me make it clear, she's not a kid. She was an adult living with her parents. I used to ride my bike around the neighborhood and would always pass her house. Every time I passed her house, I would notice that she would come outside and watch me, if she wasn't already there, that is. Back then, I never thought anything of it because I was young. Her watching me turned into her trying to talk to me. But of course I would ignore her because I didn't know her. Then she would follow me wherever I rode my bike. Now I was getting freaked out. Why the fuck was this woman I didn't know following me? That turned into her following me to my house, asking if she could come in. Eventually, I stopped riding my bike altogether, so this lady stopped what she was doing. I'm 14 now, still living in the same neighborhood. She's back. It all started with her coming to our door and knocking on it. I remembered her and immediately freaked out. Her knocking turned into her banging and violently shaking the doorknob whilst yelling. She knew the names of me and my mom and would yell them out as she pounded on the door. I have no clue how she knew our names. Neither me nor my mom have ever spoken to her in our lives. The only way she would know our names is if she asked the neighbors that know us or the landlord, which by itself is fucking creepy. Why couldn't she just ask us ourselves for our names? One night, my mom is getting ready to head out to do the laundry at the laundromat near our house. My mom unlocks the door and then goes into the living room where I am. The lady had pushed the door open, came into our house, and started to walk into the living room. My mom yelled at her and pushed her out, slamming and locking the door. This must have meant that she was waiting for the door to be unlocked, or waiting for one of us to come outside. Or it could have been a coincidence, but I don't know. My mom left eventually, and as she was walking into the laundromat, the lady was walking behind her, but my mom noticed and slammed the door so she couldn't get in. It was 12 a.m. at this point. I was folding the clothes and I hear banging on the door, and oh, what do you know? Of course, it's her again. I check the peephole and I can see her running away, as if she knew I was there. Now it was maybe 2 or 3 a.m. I was in the living room again. I hear something moving in the grass behind my house. I checked to see what it was, and it was the lady. She ran away as she saw me look at her, and this has been happening every night since then. I have also been hearing a few people stand in our front yard talking to each other quite often late at night, but I'm not sure if this has anything to do with this woman or not. I think this might be happening to our neighbors as well because I heard them talking about a stalker a couple of times. I remember them saying something along the lines of, "Go away, you neighborhood stalker." I have no idea why this started up again, but I wish it hadn't. Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you all for the overwhelming amount of support I've gotten over the last few weeks. I wasn't really sure if this channel would end up going anywhere or not, but the amount of positive feedback I've been receiving has been overwhelmingly amazing. So thank you all so much. I hope this video stayed up to my usual standards, but if you can't tell, I'm a little bit sick at the moment. I took some time off to let my throat heal a little bit, and I think today it was good enough to do another video. But if for whatever reason you're unsatisfied, don't worry. There'll be another video up sometime in the next few days. Anyways, I'm done talking your guys' ears off. Thank you guys for sticking around, and thank you guys for coming back again for another video. I hope you all enjoy another sleepless night, because there's more to come.